Hello to you all, and welcome to another instalment of the PitCast by us here at the Pit Crew Online. From the fans, for the fans. On this episode, we're talking about Ferrari, reflecting on the 2020 season and their hopes and concerns going forward into the 2021 season and beyond. I'm your host, Adam Wheeler, and I am the IndyCar correspondent here at the Pit Crew Online. Joining me today is James, also with the Pit Crew Online. Say hi, James.
Hi, Adam. Great to be back on.
And joining us also is Simon, our editor-in-chief.
Hi, James. Hi, Adam.
Fantastic, guys. So before we begin, how are you guys doing? You guys all right?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, not doing too bad.
It's been a while since we've had Simon on here. I can't remember when the last time we had you on. Was it one of the reviews, or was it the
end of the season? It's been a while.
Oh, okay.
In 2020, and that is distant past now.
We're in a different universe now. Well, fantastic. Well, we're all here, and we're talking about Ferrari, the sort of the Horcrux topic of the Formula One paddock, really. And I guess really what I want to start off talking about is there was a test really was in the news. We should talk really a little bit about Carlos Sainz and his first test with Ferrari at Fiorano. I think it was about a couple of weeks ago. It was one of a half of a dozen drivers, with Charles Leclerc himself getting a bit of mileage, sharpen up for the 2021 season. Mick Schumacher, Marcus Armstrong, Robert Schwartzman, Callum Ilott, Giuliano Alesi also had runs out in this Fiorano test, which will be significant for Sainz as he begins that transitional period into the team, having just left the McLaren F1 team. Let's start with you, Simon. What did you make of Sainz's day and a half of running?
Not really a lot to say about it. I mean, it was, I guess, more about get to know the team and maybe a little bit about the infrastructure of the car. The car was a 2018 SF71H. Now, done my research.
Mouthful.
So a lot of that car is going to trip over into the 2021 car. And she's saying he had a day and a half. So what they can really get around Fiorano from that, it's a really small track. Is it 1 point something miles? 1.9?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I know his dad was there to see it, which must have been nice. And he was there to see his son as well. But, I can't really see what, other than bedding himself into the team. And Charles has got a head start on him there. He knows the team. The team's going to be built around him. He obviously put Vettel in his place. So there's a certain amount of expectation for Carlos. He's got to get in that team and get up and running really quickly.
Yeah, I suppose that it was quite significant for Carlos going into the 2019 season, or 2018 season, was it? 2019 season, where he went into McLaren. He had that Abu Dhabi test, which was really pivotal in his transition from Renault into McLaren. And he said how important that was to him in terms of embedding himself with the team and just sort of embedding himself with all the protocols. And it really sort of made his transition into the team much more quicker than it could have been. But of course, because we've got so much testing cut this year, there's really limited scope for many drivers who are going to different teams to learn the ropes, as it were. James, how useful is it, and what can you learn really from driving a 2018 car?
I guess the first thing he's going to learn is what not to expect from the 2021 car. But cheap jokes at Ferrari's expense aside, like you both said, it's more about just sort of bedding yourself into the team and learning the way that Ferrari operates trackside. I think Sainz said afterwards, actually, in an interview that one of the key things for him was just learning where the buttons were on the steering wheel, because obviously every team has a different steering wheel. And yeah, like you yourself just said, Adam, with testing down to 3 days this year, he's going to have a day and a half pre-season testing. I think they've changed that to Bahrain now, haven't they? But he's going to have a day and a half in the car. You don't want to be using up that day and a half finding out where all the buttons are on the steering wheel and getting to know the engineers' names. It's very good to get all of that done as early as possible, and to have the time that he had at Fiorano. It's going to be, he's not going to learn a massive amount about how to drive the Ferrari as quickly as Charles Leclerc, but he's going to at least bed himself into the way the team operates, so that he doesn't have to still be doing that when we get the season underway properly.
Yeah, I suppose, or the other flip side of the coin is you could be a Nico Hulkenberg who needs literally less than half a day's worth of running in a car before putting himself really high up in qualifying.
He's just lurking behind the bins with his helmet waiting for someone.
To be fair, he's only going to get a day. Let's get this into your head, into our heads. He's got a day and a half of running in that car before he has to troop up and race in it. Besides, pre-practice and quali. A day and a half where they would normally have 2-3 day sessions in Barcelona, getting to know the team, getting to know your engineer, the aerodynamicist, how the team works.
Brushing up on his Italian.
Yeah.
I think he's got quite good Italian, actually. I think he's
Italiano. I know enough Italian to get me into trouble. Going to a restaurant, I'm really impressive with the voglio parlare italiano con lei, which is, would you like to speak Italian with me? And then they'll go at you, and it's so fast. It's like, whoa. Then you go through all your Italian food cliches. I'm sure Carlos knows, the basics on that. Pasta, pizza. You should be good to go.
I mean, it was an interesting time, and also you got some opportunity to say hello to the Tifosi who came out in support. There was a few fans on social media who'd gone to see Carlos's first running in a Ferrari. I thought that was quite sweet, actually, and it sort of sets the tone quite nicely for him going to that team. There's been a lot of social media activity going on over the past couple of weeks, sort of just promoting Carlos as a brand for Ferrari. And there's been quite a lot of positive engagement with Ferrari fans with Carlos. So you kind of get this vibe from it that, the overall scheme of things, it's going relatively well. And Carlos is actually going to settle in quite nicely into the team and feel valued. Although we say that, but also there was some other notable Ferrari drivers running also in that test, notably Mick Schumacher, who Mattia Binotto himself has said quite publicly that he is using this year as a sort of tester year to kind of get Mick kind of sussed out whether he's up for a Ferrari drive in the future. Simon, yeah, exactly. So how much do you see Mick's chances of getting a Ferrari drive in the future?
I think it's likely to happen, but if Mick goes to plan, he goes to, as James will tell you, he goes to a series. The first year, nothing too stellar. And then the second year, he seems to hit it and really get on top of it. So if the same happens with Formula One, the first year he's up against who, hopefully he absolutely destroys him. I'm sure we'll all think that. And then second year, if he gets on it, I'm sure Ferrari take. How long is Carlos's contract? Is that 2 years by chance?
It's a multi-year, but I believe it's 2 years. Yeah.
I don't think it's specified
with an option.
I think I saw some news recently that Binotto said that they're pretty optimistic about extending that 2-year contract. I think how much we can read into that is a bit debatable. We know how much we can't take Ferrari's word.
Will Binotto be there in 2 years' time for a start?
Oh, well, I think you've just opened up maybe one of my later questions, Simon.
That's good foreshadowing.
We'll get there. That's a good point, though. No, will he be there in the future? I think that's actually drawn us quite nicely onto our next topic, which is sort of the general vibe around Maranello itself and their hopes and the maybe a little bit about how the previous season went as well for Ferrari, and with a view to looking further into the future. So, I mean, there's some cautious optimism around Maranello. Mattia Binotto has been keen to stress recently that they have a minimum target of third in the Constructors' Championship for the 2021 season. Going from, where did they finish? 6th in the Constructors' Championship to 3rd. That's quite a big jump. And especially, with the stringent technical directives that are in place this year, which limit the amount of development, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but nonetheless, they've set themselves 3rd as a minimum for the 2021 season. But given 2020 season, that was one of their worst showings in almost 20 years in Formula One, pretty much since the Jean Todt Ross Brawn rebuilding era. Before that, it was horrendous, wasn't it? Let's touch on a little bit about why it was so horrendous and, you know, what went wrong. So, James, would you be able to enlighten us a little bit on what exactly went wrong?
You've given me the big question, haven't you?
If you know that, you could be the next leader of Ferrari.
Is this revenge because I asked you the same thing about Renault in our last episode?
Exactly, yeah. You've got it in one.
I think with Ferrari, when you're talking about what's gone wrong for them recently, you've got to kind of go back to 2014, which I know feels like a long time ago, but if you remember, they started off the new turbo hybrid era with a lot of hopes of challenging for the championship, and they came out with an engine that the best you can really, or the most you can really say about it is it was a working F1 engine. You know, it wasn't spectacularly quick. It also wasn't spectacularly bad. And it was coupled with a chassis that also just was not really anything spectacular. I think they finished that year 4th in the championship. Alonso got maybe 2 podiums, but it was their first winless season in a while. And the reason why that, I think, is where they've started this kind of downward spiral to where they are now is because that year they kind of went into panic mode. You know, throughout the course of that season, Stefano Domenicali started the year as team principal. He was gone after a few races. I think he was asked to fire some people from the engine department as kind of sacrificial lambs for the team's poor pace, and he stepped down in protest. And then by the end of the season, Marco Mattiacci, who was the interim team principal, came in, was replaced then by Maurizio Arrivabene for 2015. Luca de Montezemolo, the Ferrari president, had gone. And then, of course, they parted ways with Fernando Alonso. And it's never quite been clear how much that was entirely his decision or whether they were actually a little bit tired of him by that point and kind of happy that he wanted to go off to McLaren. But since then, Ferrari have never had a kind of stable, quiet season. They've had bounce back years. 2015, they won 3 races. They were Mercedes' closest challenger. 2017, 2018, they were challenging for the title. But in between those, they had years like 2016 where suddenly they were winless again. 2019, where they had the fastest engine on the grid by a country mile, but a car that was really only set up for Monza. And then obviously 2020, where they really hit rock bottom. And I think the problem with that is that throughout those years, the personnel changes didn't stop. Like I said, they made this huge restructure throughout 2014. But then I think in 2016, they got rid of Dirk de Beer from the technical department after the 2016 car was so disappointing. Maurizio Arrivabene was brought in as team principal, and then he was gone after a few years, replaced with Mattia Binotto. And now Binotto is supposedly next up for the chop. And that's such a problem for a team like Ferrari that's trying to get on par with Mercedes, because they've had so many problems in those years in terms of the engine performance, the chassis performance, the performance of the team, like race execution, strategy, pit stops. And it's impossible to address those problem areas when the people in charge of those departments are constantly changing. It's why they've not really been able to, you know, they bounced back one year, but they've not really been able to carry that forward for a few years, because by the end of the year, the people who are in charge of the team are changing. So they've had a kind of philosophy of, I think, short-term gains in each of those years. You know, it's been very much, well, we're not performing in this area, so we'll get rid of whoever's in charge and bring in someone who can do it better. And it's really shown that, like I said, they've had one good year and then they've had a year that they've stepped back and they've got rid of people, they've brought new people in, they've bounced back, and then they've stepped back again. There's been no ability to carry those gains forward.
They're consistent in their blame culture. You know, when Michael Schumacher retired, Jean Todt trotted off to the FIA. I've done my bit. Instead of doing what Ross said, which was, give me the job and I will continue this in this direction. I know the direction, I know the team. We've only lost the man at the top. I was just under here. I know what we're doing. Instead of doing that, they went back to what they'd done for the previous 25, 30 years since Scheckter, which was have only Italians running the team. Now, I've got nothing against Italians. I love Italy, but they're running it like a football team. You know, this man's no good. He's gone. You can't run a Formula One team like that. They need to bed in. They need to learn the team. And unfortunately, the passion that runs through Italians as a nation is a beautiful thing. You know, we all love that. We love Italy for so many reasons, and Italians. But that doesn't seem to work in producing a race-winning team. They need something else from somewhere else. They need someone to come in and say, this is it. This is a long-term plan. We're not going to win races and championships next year, the year after, or possibly the year after that. But in the 4th or 5th year, that's when we'll do it. We've identified 2 fantastic drivers in Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. We need to give them the machinery to shine and take Ferrari back to the top of the podium regularly. Sorry, my rant is now over.
No, that was fantastic. I suppose this is it, isn't it? It's the long-term gain and stability and the positives that can come from that. I mean, we've seen Mercedes, that sort of like their core management team, apart from some people sort of moving into some different roles or stepping away due to the end of their tenure, the core of that team really just has stayed there this entire time, whereas the likes of Ferrari and the likes of Renault, who are now obviously changed to Alpine, have just sort of chopped and changed throughout the years, which has just sort of left Mercedes just been able to keep on this long-term trajectory, just carrying on.
They've kept the core team together. And although they haven't quite been to Mercedes level, to be fair, Mercedes are a car company. They can draw on lots of different directions for inspiration and for technical analysis and technical help. But Red Bull, without wanting to sound derogatory, they are a drinks company. They're not going to sell any cars. So they haven't got that infrastructure behind them. So to keep up and be consistently, on Mercedes' tail is really impressive. That's exactly where Ferrari should be. If not at the top, they should be fighting for that position. Okay? Ferrari are the de facto reason people follow Formula One.
I suppose it all sort of went downhill, as we said, the USA Grand Prix in 2019, when the Ferrari just suddenly lost quite a lot of horsepower somehow due to some very interesting technical regulations that were put in place or clarified around that time. And since then, it's sort of become more apparent that really some core gains that Ferrari had made in the power unit possibly may have been lost. Obviously, allegedly, we don't really know the full story behind that due to many things around that story. But can we gain anything from that? Was Ferrari's lack in the power unit area is that the main reason behind their downfall, James?
I mean, certainly, yeah. Their position in 2020 is definitely down to, like you said, the loopholes that were closed off with their engine. You could see in all the teams in like speed trap figures from last year, the only teams that lost performance were Ferrari, Haas, and Alfa Romeo. The 3 teams using Ferrari engines. Everyone else gained; they went backwards. But there were reports last year from people inside Ferrari who said that the higher ups at Ferrari, the kind of from board level, there was a push for the team to pursue finding loopholes in the regulations to gain performance, almost at the expense of, any other kind of avenues of development. It was find ways that we can exploit loopholes in the regulations. And obviously it's not been verified by anyone in charge at Ferrari. It wouldn't be. But it's hardly surprising when ever since kind of 2017, when they made that leap forward to challenging Mercedes again, every time they've made that leap forward, it's been met with insinuations and informal protests from other teams. You remember the oil burn scandal. Mm. And every time the FIA has closed off loopholes, they've not said Ferrari's engine is illegal, but they've issued these technical directives, and Ferrari's pace has suffered at the end of the season as a result of it. That's part of the short-term thinking that they've had that I think has held them back, because if you're pursuing loopholes as your strategy to get better, that's inherently a short-term thing, because even if you find an advantage like they did in 2019, you're never going to be able to keep that. You might win the championship that year, but that loophole is going to get found out because Formula One teams are full of intelligent people. It's going to get closed off and you're not going to be able to use it. You'll be back to square one. Braun had the double diffuser in 2009, helped them win the championship. The rule was closed off. They couldn't use it again. Mercedes had the dual axis steering last year, may have given them an advantage toward the championship, and then the rule was closed off. They can't use it again. So I think they need to stop looking for these kind of short-term, like silver bullet fixes. And like Simon said, get that long-term plan in place. Accept that they can't necessarily win the championship next year or 2023, but just say, we need to put this infrastructure in place so that we can win it in maybe 4 years' time. But stop trying to just find that magic recipe or that magic, finding a loophole or something that's going to solve all of their problems for 1 year, because you're not going to be able to build a sort of Mercedes-style juggernaut off of that.
In a way, it's like making a cake. It's getting all those ingredients right. If you get it perfect, you get the perfect cake, you get the perfect rise, perfect texture and colour, whatever. They have, I would say, arguably the best two young drivers. I've always been a fan of Carlos Sainz. I think he was really underrated because he was up against Max Verstappen, and Max, I think in a similar way to Lewis, can control a team beyond his driving abilities. He's got that something inside him that he's almost like a magnet to people. So they want to please him, they want to help him. And I think, whilst that's good, it almost destroys his teammates because they're concentrating too much on him. And I think we've probably seen that over the last few years with Red Bull. But now, once he was released to Renault, first of all, and then Renault thought, well, he's not that good, and then they released him, went to McLaren, and he, got podiums and raced really well. And to come up as long Charles Leclerc, who I guess, along with Max Verstappen, are the two drivers that everyone's looking at now to possibly challenge Lewis in the short term. If you can't give those two guys, at least a chance of winning Grand Prix and championships, where do you go? What do you say? We're going to have another Jean Alesi. I mean, Jean was, I told you I'd be going into hysterical, but Jean was one of the best drivers I've ever seen. So passionate, such a brilliant driver, such a feel for the car. He only ever won one Grand Prix, just the one with Ferrari, because Ferrari were Ferrari. And again, they're doing it all over again. They haven't learned from their history. They haven't learned from their mistakes.
And I suppose this idea of where do they go, how do they put these things in place in order to create this long-term plan ahead? I suppose one of those pieces is Mattia Binotto. And let's just talk a little bit about him and his role in the team and how his role has been for the past couple of years. I mean, Simon, how would you describe Binotto's tenure at Ferrari so far? And would you say he's to blame for this?
No, I wouldn't say he was to blame for it. It's like, again, it's a football analogy. They sack football managers when the football managers haven't bought the players that they've been given. And it seems exactly the same with Binotto. He's got the team, he's leading the team, but the bits and pieces that have come into the team before him and since have been chosen by people, on a corporate level. Binotto lives and breathes Ferrari. He's been at Ferrari for years. He's a genuinely good guy. Is he good enough to actually win a world championship? You couldn't really tell. I mean, I think, as I've said personally, I think they need to sever all these ties with their Ferrari family. Not all of their ties with the Ferrari family, but they need to draw a line in the sand and say, well, this isn't working. Bring someone in who can teach us how to win again. I've got an idea who that will be. I'm sure Adam would kill me if I say it, but do you want me to tell you?
Go for it. Give us it.
It'd have to be the Spice Boy himself, wouldn't it? Toto's not going anywhere, and if you want a winner, there's only other one team manager that is a winner, unless you do what Alpine have done and bring someone in from another form of motorsport, and that's a risk. But work with Jean Todt, it could work again. I'm not sure where you would go, but maybe Christian needs a new challenge, and maybe he'd enjoy that.
That's a really interesting point. Maybe
but not so under the bus there.
I think you're opening a can of worms that if Ferrari were watching this, maybe they'll take note and maybe you'll put that into.
I'm sure
work.
Jerry would love to live in Italy. It's beautiful around Maranello. The food, the wine.
Oh, it'd be amazing. Absolutely amazing. I suppose you're right. I suppose. Yeah, if you were to use a football analogy, they're sort of like the Watford, aren't they? They've just changed their manager 3 or 4 times in the last season, as much as I remember how Watford were doing. But there's only so much that can achieve, isn't there? Changing a manager, and there's only so much you can hope to achieve, especially in the short term. When you change someone like that, there's always a bedding in period in which that person has to learn the ropes of the team and get to know them. And I think the people high up in Ferrari quite rate Mattia. I think they've given their support to him for the long term, which says quite a lot really about how much faith they have in him to carry the Ferrari project forward. So maybe, James, maybe this is a sign that Ferrari are more, turning a new leaf, as it were. Maybe there's a change going on in the ethos of Ferrari.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about Mattia Binotto's tenure, I think it's difficult sometimes for people to judge him because he's not that kind of like dynamic figure that someone like Christian Horner is or Toto Wolff is. He's not you don't look at him and see the kind of traditional team principle that we're used to seeing. But I think just given where Ferrari are at the moment, I think he is perhaps the right person for that role because obviously he comes from his technical background. He used to be the technical director at Ferrari. So he comes with a very methodical kind of problem-solving approach. And I think where Ferrari are at the moment, where they've got so many, it's not just, they need to get a better engine or a better car, it's they need to iron out so many small things from performance to team operational things. I think he's got the experience and he's got the approach that he can lead them back to where they need to be. He might not be the one who leads them into their next world championship, but perhaps he's the one that gets them back there. And I think, we're talking about how much good you can get from changing team leader. The example that springs to mind for me is McLaren. When they got rid of Ron Dennis and brought Zach Brown in, as great as Ron Dennis was throughout McLaren's history, I think he'd led McLaren to a point where their atmosphere had become very kind of sour within the team and it just was not working with him at the helm. And Zach Brown was able to re-energize things. Even if his first 2 years, though, the last Honda year and the first Renault year were not great, he brought something into the team that they just needed to pick themselves up and brought them into a position where when they brought Andreas Seidel in, he had a much stronger team to work with to restructure it to where they are now. So I wonder if that's kind of, with Binotto at Ferrari at the moment, whether that's kind of what Ferrari need, just someone who can just pick the team up from where it is and get them to a position where someone else can then come in and take it the final step.
The problem with that is, and I'm not saying Binotto should go, but he has been with Ferrari and only Ferrari. He knows Ferrari. He doesn't really, from what I can see, doesn't know the wider community that Zach Brown does, or even Christian Horner does. They know people. How can he improve that from within? If you're looking at training up people to get to that level, it just he's got to bring people in. And does he know those people to bring in? That would be my thought on it. My worry even.
That's a good point. Talking about Andreas Seidel, for example, he came into McLaren from Porsche and he had a very clear way of working from that team that he sort of transplanted into McLaren. And it was different to what McLaren had. And yeah, when Binotto's been in Ferrari for his entire career, that's the only way he knows how to run a team, is the way that Ferrari's been run. So I agree. I think that at some point down the line, you are going to need someone to come in with a new way of working. If it is from another form of motorsport, some way that's been successful. And it won't directly apply, but, it's just a new approach that says, the way you've been operating for the last 6 or 7 years hasn't worked. We need something different. But whether it's a complete drastic change a la 2014, I'm not sure if now is the right time for that.
Yeah. And I suppose really to sort of bookend that sort of section, I guess, looking forward into next year, there's a lot of hopes being pinned on this new Ferrari engine that's been produced at Maranello. It's had a few dyno tests and the early reports are positive at the moment. However, can we expect Ferrari's 2021 goal of a minimum of third place in the Constructors' Championship? Is that a realistic target that they can hit? Personally, for me, it does seem like a little bit of a stretch, especially given the sort of competing teams who are sort of just on an exponential rise. McLaren, Racing Point, they've got a lot of work cut out for them to really challenge for it. Guys, what do you think? What can we expect from Ferrari in 2021?
It's going to be tricky to know until we see the car on track, obviously. But it's tricky because on the one hand, it is going to be incredibly hard for them to jump from 6th to 3rd. When you consider the might of McLaren recently, you've got Alpine coming in with a new effort, Aston Martin. It's a lot of work to do. But the flip side of that is that those three teams are so evenly matched that if Ferrari is just a little bit quicker than all three of them, it can jump those 3 positions. But yeah, we're just not going to see that until we see them out on track. And even then, like, it's still going to be waiting for the first couple of races to really get an idea of where everyone is.
I can't see it at all next year. I think they should really be concentrating on 2022 when the regs change. I think next year is almost a foregone conclusion with Mercedes. Aston Martin are going to be strong. I mean, you look at the people they're bringing in. McLaren moving back to Mercedes engines. Alpina, the management structure there seems really solid. They know what they're doing. They've got a history of success over the years. So to jump those in such a short time, and with the 2022 regs looming, you almost be throwing good money after bad. I think you just bed in, do what you can this season. Carlos will get up to speed. If you have any success, brilliant. If you don't, we're here for 2022, which is exactly how Mercedes took it when we went into the hybrid era. They waited back. They knew what they were doing. They got their new driver in Lewis. Michael stood aside and then they banked it out, didn't they? And they've been doing consistently well since then. So hopefully they pay attention.
Yeah, I suppose it really takes the pressure off them if they change their expectations quite drastically in order to fit that. So if they're expecting to sort of finish around the midfield consistently, then maybe this year won't be such a culture shock from last year, and maybe the odd surprise here and there will actually be quite decent. And as you said, for drivers like Carlos Sainz, this is going to be maybe quite a rewarding year where he won't have the pressure of being in a race-winning car in Ferrari every single race. He's going to have time to just build and grow with the team until hopefully a point comes where they are there at the front, like he was at McLaren, and him and Lando Norris took those opportunities when they came. I think we're going to know quite early on, especially if we're going to tracks like Bahrain, whether their engine is going to work out. But I think I'm the same with you. I think that if they're going to make any change or they're going to make any step forward, it's going to be 2022.
Looking forward to 2022 season. 2021 is going to be a 2020 Mark II, isn't it? And will we see any fans? Will we see what we want to see with the Monacos and that kind of atmosphere at races?
Or some of us want to see the Monaco. Still a hotly contested topic. On that note, I'm actually really looking forward to having F1 back. I don't know about you guys, but it feels like it's been a long time during the off season.
I was looking forward to possibly, this time last year, I was thinking maybe next year I'll go to the test. Every year I do this. I get invites me, says, "Come on, it's easy. We'll do it together. Stay in the hotel where McLaren stays, and we'll just trot along to the circuit every morning." And the last couple of years I've said yes, and then haven't done it. And then this year I thought, yeah, this year I'll be able to do it this year. But no, unfortunately not.
You can attend it. You can attend it virtually. We'll try
to do an outing next year.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Maybe next year that's something we should look at doing. Just we'll go out there and have some fun in the sun.
Absolutely,
get a minibus.
A jolly boys outing.
Yeah, why not?
Brilliant, guys. Well, I think that's probably a really good place to wrap up. Thank you guys for joining me, and I guess that just leaves us with not much else to say, but thank you all for listening. Guys, I'm just going to quickly ask you for just to say your name and where people can reach you on social media. Simon?
I'm at F1 Taxi on Twitter.
Fantastic. And James?
I'm at James16 Matthews on Twitter.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I'm, of course, Adam, and you can reach me at Wheeler_deals on Twitter. So thank you very much all for listening. If you want to find out anything more or see more of our content, just visit our website on thepitcrewonline.net. Thank you very much all, and we will see you out on track.